Part 28. Path to Heaven. Author, Wu Ziyi. Chapter 274. What is the origin of this monk surnamed Li, even the magical potion of Dixianxianlian and other fairy levels? Early in the morning, a young monk wearing a light black brocade walked towards Wei Suo's residence while thinking so in his heart. This young monk, who was in the Wangjia firm, had been responsible for receiving the salesperson of Wei Suo before. From the beginning, in front of the Wangjia firm, he felt that Wei Suo was arrogant and felt that he had never seen the world. Until now, this young clerk has already felt that Wei Suo is really a little bit different. I saw that the clerk took out the blue jade symbol that he had to carry in the sea fairy city after he arrived outside Wei Suo's house shrouded in red light, and touched it on the red light mask. The red reticle turned blue, and it immediately returned to its original state. Then the first time he saw Wei Suo for the first time, he felt that some young monks who looked down on Wei Suo waited outside with respect. Just a moment, the red light moved slightly, and Wei Suo appeared from it. "Senior Li, this is the heavenly chalcedony you need." As soon as Wei Suo came out, the young monk took out a green jade box 1 foot long and handed it to Wei Suo. "Thank you very much." Wei Suo didn't talk much. He took the jade box, opened it and looked at it, thanked him, closed the jade box, turned and disappeared into the red mask. This monk with the surname of Li has a much better temper than other monks with different ambitions. The young clerk thought so, and there was nothing to stop, so he walked back to the direction of Wang's business firm. Just after the figure of the young clerk disappeared, a monk wearing a black robe appeared at the end of the straight road outside Wei Suo's door, and looked blankly at Wei Suo surrounded by red light. A glance at the residence, then turned around and disappeared on this road. This black robe monk exudes a very uncomfortable cold breath, and his face is extremely pale, just like Zhang's dead face. Such old monster. In the quiet room, Wei Suo placed the green jade box he had just received next to the ghost tank. At this moment, he didn't know anything about the old monsters of the corpse sect who appeared outside his residence. At the moment next to the ghost tank, there is already a treasure of pearls, and all kinds of jade with bright brilliance are piled up in a pile. As soon as the spirit chalcedony arrived this day, all the materials for arranging the Lingling array were complete. After putting down the blue jade box, Wei Suo stretched out his hand without stopping, urging a wave of real money, and wrapped it towards a black iron-like plant in front of him. The weak water stem like a black iron rod has not yet been refined, but it seems to have been swollen by Wei Suo's true Yuan bubble, and it has become a little soft and swelled up. After about several consecutive hours, Wei Suo's eyes brightened. A black aerial wire emanated from this weak water stem. Immediately afterwards, there was another trace. The hair is irreversible, and as the black air silk of 2 lines emanates, more and more black air silk emerges from this weak water stem. Wei Suo was surprised and quickly wrapped these black gas wires in real yuan, hitting the black water lily on the side. After the black gas silk was wrapped around the black water lotus for a while, it penetrated into it and disappeared without a trace. Just half an hour later, the black gas filaments were all finished, and no longer radiated out, and the whole weak water stem turned gray and white, covered with countless small holes. It looked like a gray and white coral reefs in general. With Wei Suo's real harvest, this plant has turned into a pale, weak water stem, which suddenly spread out in the air and turned into a fly ash. Wei Suo immediately looked closely at the black water lily. This weak water stalk is a plant that grows in the extremely cold icy currents of the seabed abyss. It only grows an inch in hundreds of years. Don't see that this weak water stalk is only 3 feet long. In the deep abyssal cold current, but I don't know how many years it has grown. This kind of peculiar plant, tough and abnormal, can be directly used as a magic weapon for refining wood. The old man in the green robe said that the effect of cultivating black water lotus is hundreds of times greater than the black water grass that also grows in the abyss of the seabed. Yep. What made Wei Suo's eyes light up at first was that his black water lotus at first looked the same as it was after cultivating with black water grass and other objects in the front, but on closer inspection, the surface appeared faintly many leaf veins. These veins actually formed a pattern similar to Sanskrit. Looks very strange. Wei Suo stretched out his hand and touched it twice, stirring up a real element, inspiring this treasure that could not be clearly defined by whether it was a plant or a magic weapon. Compared with the previous ones, the 4 petals of this black water lily seem to have no more glorious appearance. Because it has been asked before, the use of magic instruments and the vigorous use of true elements in his own residence is allowed for Haixian city, and will not be recorded by the blue charm. So after pondering a little, we saw that Wei Suo first activated the fire beads, and then directly stimulated the 6 yang fire fork towards the black water lotus. Peng made a muffled noise. "Grandma, if you want to try, you can't wait to try again later. Now that you've tried it just after the cultivating. Isn't it a good thing overnight? It hurts me to think what happened." The voice of the old man in green robe immediately it rang. "Why saw, what's the matter? Are you trying this black lotus?" Wei Suo did not reply for a moment, but his eyes were shining with golden light. The Liu Yang divine fire fork was just ejected just now. The black water lotus, not to mention any damage, simply did not leave a small mark. Ordinary spirit level middle level defensive magic weapons, while blocking the bombardment of the real spirit level middle level magic weapon of the 6 Sun divine fire fork, there must be some damage. Just like Wei Suo's red shield of the lower ranks of the spirit level, when he was bombarded by the attack weapon of the lower level of the spirit level, a small pit was also hit. Only the defensive magic weapon 1 level higher will resist any magic weapon 1 level lower, and there will be no damage at all, so that the magic weapon 1 level lower cannot be shaken. Now Liu Yang Shenhuoka can't shake this black water lotus at all, which means that this black water lotus should have reached the defensive power of the spirit level high grade. It's really shameful, just to reach the defensive power of the spirit grade top grade. Before reaching the level, I was excited to look like this. Seeing Wei Suo's eyes gleaming with golden light, the look of joy broke. "Green robe," the old man said so contemptuously again. "It's good to have a spirit level top grade pick and take. Dao level things will be discussed later." Wei Suo smiled and put the black water lotus away. The expression became more excited. "Old man, since you came out now, we can arrange this gathering together. Although it's not difficult to arrange the jeweling array, but..." The voice of the old man in green robe paused. What he originally wanted to say is that although the arrangement of the jeweling array is not difficult, for you, a commodity that does not have much experience with the magic circle at all, just laying the runes on the ground is enough for you to eat a pot. But when I thought that Wei Suo had already reached the consciousness of the Jindan monks, even the formation of the consciousness should be easy to do. The old man in green robe couldn't say it anymore, so he only scolded in his heart. "Grandmas." "But what?" Wei Suo was taken aback. After all, this Tianlan orange crystal was only exchanged by him with 2 pieces of fire fairy lotus. If this magic circle could not be arranged, it would be really big. "It's nothing." The old man in the green robe gave Wei Suo a white look, and the green light and shadow flashed, but he turned out a pattern directly in front of Wei Suo. This spirit array, like most magic circles, depends on the ground. You first arrange the runes on the ground, then refine these jade stones, and arrange them as shown in the array. "It's nothing, you're nothing, scare me." Wei Suo glanced at the old man in green robe, depressed, didn't say much, carefully looked at the runes shown on the array. Wei Suo, who has been taught by Jin Qiao'er, has also made it very clear that the arrangement of this array can be said to be similar to that of refining a symbol. It's just that the rune patterns of the magic circle are larger than the rune patterns of Fulu. "Old man, why do these general law formations have to be engraved on the hard stone ground instead of the mud ground? It can also communicate the atmosphere and arrange it on the mud ground. Isn't it effortless?" At the time, Wei Suo, who had all the runes on the map remembered, asked this sentence very well. "You pig," the old man in green robe suddenly scolded. "Each of these runes, like the monk's meridian, is a unique aura circuit, let alone different runes. It is the same rune, the pattern, the depth, and the thickness are different, and the speed at which the aura flows in it is very different. If you make a mistake, you will not be able to excite the magic circle. Mudland, you let me see the mudland that will not be deformed, and the aura will not change when it hits. If you step on one foot wrong, the circle will not work. Ask such an idiot question. I have no feet. If I really have feet, I will definitely step on your face. Isn't it just asking a question? Is it necessary to be so fierce?" After Wei Suo murmured depressively, he immediately arranged meticulously. "I saw that he transformed a purple real element, and then this purple real element, under the envoy of his powerful consciousness, formed a blanket of thin light and fell to the ground. After that, Wei Suo showed the unevenness on the ground, all controlled the true elements with his consciousness, and all were flattened. Later, he saw a group of true elements, turned into hundreds of thin silk, and then printed on the ground, first cut a mark on the ground, outlined all the signs shape, then he will make a line of runes, carefully control the true element with the consciousness, and slowly sculpt its width and depth. All the dust that was cut off was completely washed away by him with true Yuan. Path to Heaven. Author, Wu Ziyi. Chapter 275. Oops. Old man, I accidentally confused your 5-stone stone with 3-color jade, as if it were 3-color jade. What? The old man in green robe screamed. Haha, old man, don't worry, just make a joke with you. Who made you just so fierce? Just 2 or 3 hours after this episode, Wei Suo looked expectantly standing in a square circle, occupying more than half of the ground in this quiet room. The runes in this circle, the seemingly unsophisticated mystery, the jade embedded in it, glittered like glittering stars in the sky. The outermost circle of runes is round, and they are all inlaid with white chalcedony of heavenly spirits. At the center of the eye is a fist-sized orange-red crystal ball. Lan orange crystal and true magnetic gemstone are smelted, and it is also covered with many earthworm-like runes. After a few hours of busy work, a small gathering together was finally completed. Never go wrong. After Wei Suo's call to pray to the Buddha in his heart, he was very nervous, and a real element was infused toward the orange-red crystal ball in the center. Even if it weren't for the Tianlan orange crystal, the rest of the formation was arranged, but it took Wei Suo not less than 50,000 inferior spirit stones. A surprise appeared immediately on the faces of Wei Suo and Ji Yat. I saw that as Wei Suo's true Yuan permeated into it, all the jade inlaid in the whole magic circle was soaring, and all the simple and mysterious runes on the ground also exuded radiance. A moment later, the white edge of the 16 arms with a thin beam of light was poured out at the very edge of the circle, and it was solidified. Immediately, the aura in this magic circle obviously became thicker. Wei Suo and Ji Ya couldn't help but glance at each other, but the aura in this circle became more and more thick. If anyone has an eye that can overlook the entire Haixian city and can see the subtle aura at this time, he will certainly be shocked. Because he would see that the spiritual energy in the entire Haixian city was flowing towards this residence of Wei Suo, as if Wei Suo's residence had become a bottomless cave, sucking in the spiritual qi. The jeweling array kept sucking the aura. Soon, the aura in the jeweling array was so thick that it turned into white, and even a drop of aura droplets condensed in it. Wei Suo stood in the circle and took a deep breath. The change in his eyes immediately showed a shocking light. It's just that this breath is absorbed, and the aura contained in it seems to exceed the amount of aura contained in the 2 inferior spirit stones. Normally, in this sea-fairy city, if one day dies, he can only absorb the aura of 1 inferior spirit stone. Now he can absorb the aura of 2 inferior spirit stones in one breath. How many times does the concentration of Reiki exceed in Haixian city? Without stopping at all, Wei Suo nodded toward Jia, and immediately flew out of his residence. The effect of this gathering of spirits to absorb the aura is so terrifying that Wei Suo is really worried. From the outside, he can clearly feel that the aura is being poured towards his residence continuously. What made his eyes suddenly filled with ecstasy was that, as the old man in the green robe said, even if he stood outside his residence, he could not feel the obvious flow of aura with his consciousness. After all, the richness of the aura in the seafaring city is much thicker than some of the places where the auras were lost in ancient times, but in fact a monk can absorb one day at most, and at most there can only be one aura of inferior aura. It's still very thin. Moreover, a monk like him can only cover 210 of feet in radius, but it is impossible to cover the entire city of Haixian City. Certainly even the Jindan monks could not find that the aura in the sea immortal city was sucked in by the continuous gathering of his spiritual array. Wei Suo immediately recaptured his residence and the static of the spiritual array. In the room. There is no problem, absorb the aura soon. After saying such a sentence to Jia, Wei Suo and Jia didn't stay at all into the Lingling formation, sat down, and absorbed their cultivation. This aura of spiritual veins is extremely easy to refine, and now the effect of gathering Lingling is as if Wei Suo and Jia suddenly entered a warehouse filled with Lingdan which can be quickly upgraded to repair. Now what to do? The thing is to swallow these spirits as soon as possible. What? Wei Suo is going to be completely crazy. The speed at which this Reiki is absorbed is simply unimaginable. Originally based on Wei Suo's current cultivation practice, if you use your demon pill to cultivate as much as possible, you can only refine 20 or so golden spirits in a day, which is equivalent to 2 golden spirits in 1 hour, and 200 auras of inferior spirits. Looks like. But now that Wei Suo is fully absorbed in cultivation, between 1 and 2 breaths, he can absorb the aura of 3 to 4 inferior spirit stones, and he can be thoroughly refined. In this way, in 1 hour, Wei Suo can absorb the aura of nearly 4,000 inferior spirit stones in 1 hour, which is equivalent to refining and 40 Jin Ling Dan. That is to say, Wei Suo's cultivation speed is 20 times faster than using Jin Ling Dan to practice. Wei Suo and Jia absorbed the aura madly, and the aura of the entire Haixian city was also continuously drawn by the Lingling volume. The spirits drawn from the Juling array, only Wei Suo and Jia, could not absorb them at all. After the concentration of the aura in the aura has reached a certain level, it can no longer in more aura, which is equivalent to keeping the aura in the aura at this amazing concentration. Each time the Juling array is activated, it can maintain the power of 4 hours. The next Wei Suo, besides activating the Juling array every 4 hours, is not in the Juling array. Practice. In addition to casting spells for Hanwei Wei once a day, Jia is also trying to absorb the aura practice in the gathering together. Wei saw, I'm breaking through. In less than 2 days, Jia, who was already at the 3-level and 4-level weekly levels, uttered a pleasant whisper of surprise, exuding 9 groups of white and bluish Shenhai Guanghua. Jia, who has been concentrating on assisting Wei Suo's cultivation until Kushu is the fastest and has little time to practice, finally broke through to Zhou Tianjing's 4-fold cultivation practices. What? It was only 10 days later, and Jia was another cry of surprise, her body, blooming 10 groups of radiant Shenhai Guanghua. Before, Jia had always practiced with spirit stones, and now Wei Suo feels to practice in this spiritual formation, which is 20 times faster than normal cultivation. For her, 1 day in this spiritual formation, it is comparable to the usual practice of retreat for decades. It only took 10 days for Jia to break from the 4th level of Zhou Tianjing to the 5th level of Zhou Tianjing. The speed at which this type of cultivation entered the border made her feel like a breakthrough. At the moment she felt a breakthrough, losing her ground made her afraid. Jia's breakthrough naturally delighted Wei Suo. Compared with Jia's failure to improve because of Xiu's entry into the territory, Wei Suo's breakthrough speed is not so fast because of Xiu's breakthrough. 19 days after Jia broke through Zhou Tianjing's 5 weights, Wei Suo's tightly closed eyes suddenly opened. At the moment when he opened his eyes, 12 groups of dazzling purple sea gods bloomed on his body. At the same time, the entire quiet room was once again filled with the huge roar of the stunning waves. The faint 3 colors on Wei Suo's body have also been completely dissipated. The skin on his body exudes an ivory gloss, which is very beautiful. Divide the mind into 2 layers. Originally, in Wei Suo's expectation, if you practice normally, it would take at least 580 days or more before you can go from a 1-point practice to a 2-level practice. But in this gathering of spirits, only for a total of 31 days, Wei Suo broke through to divide the mind into 2 levels of cultivation practice. At such an amazing speed, I have been practicing in the Lingling formation. Can I continue to practice until the 5 levels of the mind, facing the golden pill? The amazing effect of gathering auras such as Juling Array made Wei Suo not dare to waste any time after breaking through the initial excitement of splitting into 2 levels, and went on to practice. Strange, as usual, have you noticed that Haixian City's recent aura seems to be a little thinner? I used to be able to absorb about 90% of the aura of the inferior spirit stone in one day, but these days, I have always been able to I have absorbed about 80% of my aura. Just one day after Wei Suo broke through to 80 years after splitting the 2 levels of cultivation, an old man wearing a grey coat and a middle-aged monk dressed in a white shirt scribe, from Wei Suo's residence passing by. Isn't it? Hearing the old man in a grey robe, the white shirt scribe stunned slightly and said, "Lao Lu, I haven't felt it carefully. It's said that the soul vein of Haixianzong will be exhausted in a few years at the earliest. Is it the spirit of this spirit vein that has already begun to dry up?" The old man in grey robes muttered. The figure slowly disappeared into the night. Just about half an hour after the figures of these 2 disappeared on the road in front of Wei Suo's residence, a black figure slowly came out of the darkness. This figure was shrouded in black robe, his face was pale, and his body was yin-airy. From a distance, it looked like a pale dead face floating in the air, very terrifying. This monk is the elder of the Yin corpse, who is a 5-time cultivator, and a strange old zudge. I didn't even go out for more than 100, did you retreat in silence? After Yin sneered extremely coldly, Zudge Old Squint swept around slightly, and then took out a white round bowl. After that, the old monster bit, but he bit his tongue and sprayed a bit of blood is in this white round bowl. A chilling scene appeared. A transparent ghost image rose from the white bowl and flicked through it, passing through the red mask outside Wei Suo's residence. Because of physical discomfort, the next time is around 4 p.m. tomorrow. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Path to Heaven. Author, Wu Ziyi. Chapter 276. The height of the transparent ghost from the white bowl in the hands of Zudge's old monster is so high that in the night, it is simply invisible and invisible. After releasing this transparent ghost image, Zudge Old squinted slightly with a squint and quickly put away the white bowl in his hand, as if he hadn't done anything, but just stood silently on the mountain road. The transparent ghost quickly passed through the linked yen, like a gas, seeping directly into the door slit. Jia and Wei Suo still closed their eyes tightly and rehearsed in the Lingling formation, not even aware of the crisis. At the moment, Jia has successfully broken through the level and reached the 1-point cultivation of the sub-idea, and it has reached the end of the first part of the sub-ideal period, but there is a faint tricolor gloss on the face, which is obviously a breakthrough to the point. I took Jinshan ginseng fruit during my 9th birthday. And Wei Suo, who sat next to her with her eyes closed and motionless, had already broken through to the 3-fold practice of splitting the mind. The speed of cultivation in this spiritual array is too fast. 70 to 80 years of hard work is equivalent to 4 to 5 years of closed rehearsal hard work in ordinary immortality cultivation. Suddenly, Wei Suo's brow jumped sharply and opened his eyes. Immediately, a loud bang sounded clearly around the door of this residence. Wei Suo suddenly changed his face, because the sound is obviously the impact of the consciousness of the heart eater. The quiet room used to cultivate the heartworm is not far from his quiet room, and in addition to the food for Zio, he ordered the heartworm to help him and Jiya guard this place and help them protect the law. Only when someone invades, the heartworm will attack it. Why saw, what's going on? This time, even Jiya was alarmed, and she stood up from the Lingling face with a big face change. Go. Wei Suo stretched out his hand and directly sacrificed the black water lotus first, and took the blood-feeding knife in his hand. He ugly ran out of this quiet room. Heart Eater is one of his baby pimples, and he doesn't know how many spirit stones and blood have been smashed on his body. If something happens, then he must vomit blood because of heartache, and more importantly, Han Weiwei is in a quiet room next to them. If something happened to Han Weiwei, it would be hard to compensate for 100 heart eaters. Jiya is also a white-faced magic weapon in the shape of a yellow hill, and a hand of Qing Gangfan swept it out. Yep. Wei Suo quickly inspired an aura of light, protecting himself and Jiya, but at the same time he was startled. At this time, he clearly felt that the heartworm had chased the intruder and entered the small hall in front of him. But this intruder is a completely transparent, twisted yin soul. It stands to reason that such a completely transparent and invisible yin soul, Wei Suo, is impossible to perceive, but now Wei Suo can clearly perceive the existence of this yin soul very clearly, and can also feel clearly, this yin soul is rushing towards his teeth and claws at the moment. Snapped. This completely transparent yin soul, actually twisted, penetrated directly through the gap of the 4 lotus petals of the black water lotus, and hit the aura of Wei Suo and Jiya. The entire aura of light the hood actually made a loud noise and shook it slightly. What is an invisible magic weapon? Jiya's face was horrified. Her present consciousness, covering the entire hall and the surrounding quiet rooms, had no problem at all, but she could not feel the existence of any opponent at all. Any spiritual fluctuation. Why saw, what the is going on? At this time, the figure of the old man in the green robe rang in Wei Suo's ear. Looking at you, you seem to feel the other party. It is a yin soul, Wei Suo replied very ugly. Someone wants to use this yin soul to secretly calculate us. This yin soul must have been trained by a monk, otherwise there will be no yin anger. It exudes, it is invisible, and the attack power is also half spirit level. Yin soul. Between the exclamation of Jiya and the old man in green robe, Wei Suo had reached out and turned out a gold grid, and fell towards the hood of the yin soul that was so tall. Now that Wei Suo has achieved the 3-point cultivation of the ideal state, this golden snake dances in full swing, and each golden snake like lightning is very condensed and crackling, and the surface of each lightning is formed with real snake-like scales. Looks astonishingly powerful. Yep. But the hundreds of golden snake-like lightning bolts fell all at once, and the frightened flashed in Wei Suo's eyes, but the face became even more ugly. Why? Didn't it hit? Jiya asked nervously when she saw Wei Suo's blow. In the face of opponents that she could not perceive at all, she had no way of shooting. My thunder tactics have no effect on this yin soul. Wei Suoming looked very clearly. At least 7 or 8 golden snake lightnings hit this yin soul, but these golden snake lightnings hit this one. The body of the yin soul actually passed by directly, as if it did not affect the yin soul at all. The reason why he used the thunder trick is because the thunder spell has the most lethal power to the yin gas weapon and the yin soul. But this golden snake thunder tactic can't cause any damage to this soul, which is too weird. No effect. The old man in green robe suddenly made a sound of surprise. Now this yin soul condenses into a small group. Wei Suo's face changed drastically. Old man, haven't you seen this kind of yin soul? At this time, in Wei Suo's perception, the transparent yin soul had condensed into a transparent bead the size of an eyeball, which was very strange, and the power of this bead seemed to be much larger than that when it was just humanoid. Thunder spells don't work, can they condense into a small group? When the old man in green robe stayed, he immediately remembered something normal, and wowed, why so? Hurry. Use yin phosphor sand or corpse water to deal with it. Without any hesitation, Wei Suo grabbed a hand and immediately took out a bag of phosphate sand and shook it out. At the same time, reach out a little, and get the white se gourd filled with the carrion water obtained from the black rat's old mustache. Laugh. I saw the phosphor fire of a puff of blue and black spread out, and the transparent beads condensed by the soul of the yin shuddered violently, and the place where the phosphor fire adhered to it was actually burned to emit green smoke. The green beads on the surface of the transparent beads were scattered, and even Ji-ya saw this strange yin soul bead. Without any stay, Wei Suo raised his finger, and a corpse of water squirted out of the white gourd, wrapping this yin soul bead ball that seemed to be in a bad situation and seemed to want to run back. This time, the entire surface of the yin soul bead suddenly floated with green smoke, and the yin gas in it seemed to be burning away quickly. At this time, standing on the road outside Wei Suo's residence, a pair of old Zuch monsters with a chest look suddenly changed their faces. I saw his eyes flashed a few times, then glared at Wei Suo's residence twice with his fierce eyes, and then flashed back, and soon disappeared into the night. Old man, what the is this? In Wei Suo's residence, as soon as he saw the yin soul bead burned by the rotting corpse water, Wei Suo couldn't help it while he was determined in his heart, cried the old man in green robe. Seize the demon soul. This is a monk who is good at yin yuan exercises, using his own jing yuan and the yin souls of the high-level monks who have been killed, to refine the seized demon spirit. This kind of seized demon spirit, no se invisible, you can ignore many prohibitions, and it is an excellent device for sneak attacking secret calculations. Moreover, this kind of capture the demon soul, after the refining of the mysterious method, the various techniques are useless to it, but it can only be reversed. Only yin tools such as yin phosphorus sand can kill it. A piece of such a snatching demon soul can only be refined in at least a few decades, and the cost is definitely no better than creating a Taoist method. There are few devices. Why is there such a thing suddenly slipping in? If you don't realize it, you will be a puppet by the CAO indulgence in this body, and you will immediately notice that we are gathering spirits and want to use this seize the demon soul to turn you into a puppet. To figure out what is going on, the voice of the old man in green robe still seemed terrified. Jia, you first control this carrion water hyacinth, refine this devil's demon soul, I will go out and see. Hearing the old man in green robe saying this, Wei Suo said this to Jia, and immediately flew out. Wei Saw, how are you? Just a moment, Jia saw Wei Suo swept in again. There are no monks outside. The other party should have gone away, Wei Suo replied, frowning. This kind of seize the demon soul can only be refined by rebuilding it into a monk yin soul above at the same time. We are definitely not ordinary monks. Very likely it is the old yin corpse elder Zuch old monster you saw at the exchange meeting. Is there any breath on you that he noticed? The old man in green robe cried a few words and suddenly remembered. What is it like? Why saw, this kind of snatching the demon spirit, can only be felt if you have a magical eye technique or a monk who has a special magic weapon in it. How can you see it? Of. Weso glanced at the green smoke-filled bead wrapped in the carrion water. At this moment this bead is only 1/3 the size of the previous one. It seems that it will definitely not escape, and it will soon be refined. After a little deep pondering, Wei Suo took out the slave beast bag and put away the heart eater. Then he closed his eyes and felt it. A slightly surprised immediately appeared on his serious expression. Is it because of this heart eater? Jia and the old man in green robe looked at his movements and the changes in the gods on his face, and they all responded and asked aloud. Path to Heaven. Author, Wu Zy. Chapter 277. Weso nodded and released the heartworms immediately. I can't think of the invisibility of this heart eater, but it has evolved the ability to resist stealth. Seeing Wei Suo nod, the old man in green robe completely understood what was going on, whispering. If there weren't this heart-biting bug this time, then we might be all over. Wei Suo looked at Zizui, and his vision of taking the demon soul completely refined by the rotting corpse water was very deep. Although it seems to be very easy to deal with this seize the demon soul, it is actually more dangerous than Weizhuo when he played against the Zhang family ancestors. Because without this heart eater, he and Jia, even if they are not in the practice of silence, without any precautions, have no resistance to this seize the demon soul. No wonder the last time I clearly felt that the heartworm has advanced, but it has not evolved any special ability. It turns out that this heartworm advanced formation is not a means of attack, but a unique ability to detect invisibility, so and Wei Suo, who has a unique mental and spiritual connection, will immediately perceive this seizing demon soul clearly. Now Wei Suo even remembered the monk of the Longgu zone. Later, when researching the magical techniques of immortal Gu obtained from him, Wei Suo discovered that Dragon Kite had a unique ability to detect hidden things and fear the godlike magic weapon. At first, the monk with disordered hair seemed to rely on Dragon Kite and found the hidden Wei Suo at once. This heartworm was advanced by absorbing the brain marrow of Dragon Kite, and now it has evolved this ability, which makes Wei Suo once again think that his previous inference may be true. This heartworm has been sucking. If the brain of a certain monster is advanced, it is very likely to form a certain ability of that monster. According to the ability of this Dragon Kite to fly in the air, this Dragon Kite should be considered a variant of the wind monster. Only in the end is it not true, but I still have to try it slowly to know that the first thing to deal with now is the accident of the sudden snatching demon soul. This time it is calculated that ours is probably the Zhuge monster of the Yin corpse, but it should not be that we killed the Yin corpse's disciple, but just greedy me. It should be me. The son wanted so many things, and his surpassing monk's secrets made him secretly. Maybe his Ri followed me secretly and found that I entered Haixianzong and made a deal with the ancestor of Xuanhuan. Very extraordinary thing. Wei Suo's eyes flashed for a few times. Shen said, otherwise, because of the matter of the Yin corpse disciple, with the strength of the Yin corpse, just ask Haixianzong to be a direct person. It is impossible to use this method to sneak up on secret calculations. Anyway, this destroy the demon soul will take decades of hard work. Now that we have killed the destroy the demon soul, we have already formed an indissoluble beam with this person. Jia took a deep breath and looked at Wei Suo and asked, what shall we do next? Do you manage to leave the city immediately? Wei Suo pondered for a moment and shook his head. We just killed this captive demon soul. If we want to leave now, we will probably be targeted by this person. Now we stay in Haixian city. This man managed his own losses, suffered a loss, but also hindered the Haixian sect and could not deal with us with fairness and justice. If he went out of the Haixian city, this person can find any reason, he can use the power of the Yin corpse, bright and upright. We are besieging us. Now it's best if we haven't happened anything, so we should continue to practice here. With this gathering, we can escape if we are able to face the pursuit of the Jindan monks. To the point where we don't have to be afraid of anyone. This Yin corpse's people are too arrogant, the old man in green robe yelled depressively. I'm not familiar with this Yunling mainland. There is no way. Wei Suo, when we come back to Tianqian mainland, immediately go to explore the two ancient caves that I know, and then you can get one or two powerful magic weapons, and you must come back and give the Yin corpse some beauty. Wei Suo heard the old man in green robe cry, but he couldn't help but smile bitterly. I replaced the elder who was a Yin corpse. There is a Yin corpse who is so big as a backer. In the hands of a monk who was much lower than himself, he broke a thing that he spent decades cultivating. It certainly won't give up. It is not necessarily possible to cure Han Wei and solve the Zhuge monster problem now. Returning to Tianqian continent to explore the cave mansion known to the old man in the green robe, it is really far away. And with the improvement of cultivation practice, now even with the Lingling formation, if you want to cultivate a breakthrough, it will not be so fast. It took more than 80 days for Wei Suo to complete the breakthrough from the 2-point cultivation of the two-level concept to the 3-point cultivation of the two-level concept. The speed of cultivation in the gathering array is more than 20 times faster than the speed of using the demon Dan under normal circumstances. Therefore, under normal circumstances, Wei Suo's cultivation of behaviors from the 2-point splitting of the two-level conception to the 3-level splitting of the two-level conception would take at least 1,700 days, 4.5 years, and nearly 5 years. And now Wei Suo has also thoroughly felt that as the cultivation level is higher, the time required for breakthrough is not as simple as doubling, but it takes more time than doubling. As he estimates now, if he is to practice normally, it will take nearly 4,000 days to go from the 3-level cultivation to the 4-level cultivation, which means 11 to 12 years. Therefore, even if there are adventures, or the large disciples who have enough spiritual stones to supply, they are generally at least 30 years old when they have reached the 3 levels of split mindfulness. Most of them are in their 50s. Cultivation has no years, and as cultivation practices become higher and higher, Wei Suo has a deeper understanding of the meaning of this sentence. Now that Wei Suo is going to break from the 3-fold split to the 4-fold split, there is still 170 to 80, more than 5 months. After carefully searching around the residence and inside the residence again, Wei Suo and Ji Ya, uneasy, placed Han Wei in the quiet room with the Lingling array. Then Wei Suo placed the heartworm directly outside the door of this quiet room. Because it is determined that Pei Yei will not cause the heartworm to evolve no ability after advanced, in the absence of enough monster brain, Wei Suo also began to let this heartworm in the Pei Yao liquid. Started. In the following time, Wei Suo assumed that nothing had happened. Except for the same as before, he went out every 10 times and asked the people of Haixianzong to check the magic symbols on his body and add some refining monsters. In addition to the materials needed for the liquid, the rest of the time is almost no hard work in the gathering. At the same time, because Xiansha is also an important reliance on Wei Suo and Ji Ya, they also resumed their double cultivation twice a day during the next period. After eating a sullen loss, he did not take advantage of it, but instead damaged a very difficult seizure demon soul. The Zhuge-old monster seemed to have disappeared and never appeared again. With the passing of time without sound, almost all the monks of Haixian City have discovered that the spirit in Haixian City seems to be thinner than one. Among the mountain gates of Haixianzong, a dozen white jade lotus terraces were scattered at the foot of the extraordinary sea fairy statue. On these white jade lotus platforms, 2 young disciples of Haixianzong were sitting cross-legged. The 2 young disciples of Haixianzong are all 27-year-old. One of them is wearing a light green vest and the other is wearing a moon-white robes. They all look like sword brown eyes and magnanimity. Extraordinary. Moreover, these 2 young disciples are awe-inspiring, and they are obviously the most disciples of Haixian sect. The 2 young disciples sat on the white jade lotus platform, each body had a layer of aura flashing rhythmically, and it was obvious that they were all sitting meditatively. Suddenly, on the statue of the sea fairy above their heads, there was a crackling noise. This sea fairy and jade statue was previously beautiful, without any damage. But at this moment, on the red lotus in the hands of the sea fairy statue, I do not know when to start, but it is already covered with dozens of deep cracks. At this moment, with the crack of the click, a deep crack was added to the red lotus in the hand of the sea fairy, and many pieces of red jade fell with it. Both young disciples opened their eyes and raised their heads to see such a scene, and their faces suddenly changed. Ancestor! Immediately, the 2 young disciples suddenly felt something like that, and immediately turned around together, saluting them extremely respectfully. The ancestor of Xuanhuan, dressed in yellow robes and with white hair, didn't know when he was standing not far behind the 2 of them. At the moment, he was looking up at the statue of the sea fairy above his head. You continue to practice. Xuanhuan patriarch waved his hands blankly at the 2 people without leaving, he stood motionless. The two young disciples were also in awe of Xuanhuan's ancestors. Hearing the words of Xuanhuan's ancestors, they suddenly didn't dare to speak out and immediately closed their eyes and sat down to practice. Only a moment later, a disciple of Haixian sect wearing a black shirt flew over, paid a ceremonial gesture to the ancestor of Xuanhuan, and immediately handed a piece of white jade to the ancestor of Xuanhuan. The ancestor of Xuanhuan stretched his hand to touch this piece of white jade, and there seemed to be endless things flashing in his eyes. It seemed that this piece of white jade was recorded with an alarming amount of information, and he immediately took all of them. Read all the messages. A fierce killing flashed in his eyes, but then his powerful breath quickly converged, giving the impression that it was just like an ordinary Xuanjing monk, this amazing magical gold the priest of the Dan period, out of the white spirit light that enveloped the Haixian Zong, and then walked all the way to Wei Suo's residence. In just one step, he walked through the red light curtain without obstruction and stood in front of the Lingtian in front of Wei Suo's residence. Path to Heaven. Author, Wu Ziyi. Chapter 278. The consciousness has been swept away, why should we hide? Hide it for me. Directly through the prohibition of the red light curtain, the ancestor of Xuanhuan standing in front of the Lingtian, said blankly towards Wei Suo's residence, said coldly. Wei Suo with a helpless smile and Jiya with a white face came out of the door of the residence. It's you. At this moment, Wei Suo was the original face, and his face was very different from that of the yellow wax monk who followed the Yinlai San people to deal with Xuanhuan ancestors, but Xuanhuan ancestors recognized it at a glance. When we recognized Wei Suo at first glance, this golden monk who exuded horror and coercion was also slightly stunned. It seemed that he did not expect to live here, but it was the one who traded with him on the same day. Monk. It is the junior. Wei Suo nodded bitterly. Looking at the posture of Xuanhuan's ancestors, there is no need to say anything. The ancestor of Xuanhuan narrowed his eyes slightly and looked at Wei Suo silently. The rippling aura formed a tumbling yellow cloud around him, and the clouds above the entire Haixian city seemed to be cloudy and uncertain. What method did you use to steal my Sci-fi city's aura? After a moment of silently watching Wei Suo, Xuanhuan's ancestor Binghan asked extremely. The juniors arranged a gathering array since it was discovered, Wei Suo had nothing to hide, and answered truthfully. Gathering array? This kind of formation has been lost for tens of thousands of years. I can't think you know how to arrange this kind of formation. Patriarch Xuanhuan lowered his eyelids. You want Tianlan orange crystals. Do you want to arrange this? Wei Suo opened his mouth, sighed, and said nothing, and nodded. Hello brave. In exchange for the Tianlan orange crystal from my hand, I arranged the magic circle instead, and absorbed the spirit of my Sci-fi city. Do you really think I don't exist? Xuanhuan Patriarch's eyes burst out. Yugzuzes who? Are you a Ziwi Zong person? Seeing that the ancestor Xuanhuan was about to start, Wei Suo had nothing to say. He reached out a little and sacrificed the Yugzuzes who while offering black water lotus also sacrificed. It is definitely not possible to fight now, depending on whether there is any chance to escape Han Xiancheng with Han Weiwei. At the first sight of the Suyuan Patriarch's gaze at the Weixu sacrifice of the jade deficiency and purple boat, the murderousness of his body instantly became more than several times thicker. The juniors have nothing to do with Ziwi Zong, this magic weapon is just a coincidence. Wei Suo clasped both the blood-eating knife and the King Suo silver staff in his hands, his eyes flashing slightly. Is it? At this time, the ancestors of Xuanhuan saw Wei Suo and Jiya stubbornly wanting to resist. His eyes flashed coldly, and he had not seen any movements. A dazzling yellow light wrapped him in inside. This group of yellow light has a diameter of 6 or 7 feet. I don't know what kind of spells and magic weapons are inspired. The surface of the aura is constantly spreading into the shape of a perennial green, before the amazing pressure and Wei Suo. Any spells and magic weapons I've seen can't be compared at all. As this group of yellow light emerged, a yellowish flame burst through the yellow light at the same time. At this time, Wei Suo's face changed drastically. A silver-black brilliance radiated from the silver rope staff on the left hand, covering the cocky flame in front of him in an instant, and at the same time, the blue-black yin gas on the right hand surged, condensing into a blue-black devil's claws, grabbed this yellowish flame. Oh! White flames erupted from the earthy yellow flame enveloped by the gray-black brilliance, and then immediately collided with the blue-black devil's claws, and the aura was extinguished a lot. But what made Wei Suo's eyes appear horrified is that this earthy yellow flame that has been extinguished has almost no stagnation. It directly penetrated the blue-black devil's claw, and immediately penetrated Jiya's magic weapon with the shape of a yellow hill. The excited yellow giant cocoon hit the black water lily petal in front of him with unrelenting momentum. A pop bang, the black water lotus shuddered violently, the water shined, and the petals were shocked by a black splash, as if the water inside was shocked. It was not until this time that Wei Suo could see clearly that the yellowish blaze was a magic weapon that looked like a lotus flower the size of a longan. The power of this magic weapon is far more than the magic weapon of the top grade of the spirit level, and it is definitely a magic weapon of the Tao level. Yep. Seeing that Wei Suo could block his own blow, the ancestor Xuanhuan was also slightly stunned, a look of amazement flashed in his eyes. This slowed down, a pungent grey brilliance, but blazing from the silver rope silver staff in the hands of Wei Suo, wrapped the ancestor Xuanhuan in it. Most of the grey brilliance, even through the yellow brilliance outside the ancestor of Xuanhuan, fell on the body of Xuanhuan ancestor. Xuanhuan ancestor's complexion suddenly changed. With the sound of boom, an amazing yellow airflow rushed from the ground, pushing the ancestor of Xuanhuan like a teleport, pushing directly into the sky 50 feet above, and escaping from the grey envelope. As soon as Wei Suo raised his hand, the grey brilliance on the silver staff of Qing Suo continued to chase towards the ancestor of Xuanhuan. Ya Wei Han Wei not far from the door. But what made him and Jiya's faces white at the same time was that a billowing yellow gas suddenly surged around him and Jiya, even a circle of yellow crystal walls forming an encircling wall instantly, separating him and Jiya got stuck in it. The power of this yellow crystal wall alone seems to be no less than a spiritual high-level defensive weapon. The ancestor of Xuanhuan in the sky was just a flash, and he avoided the grey brilliance that was inspired on his silver rope silver staff. When he reached out, a yellow airflow poured out of the residence hall behind Wei Suo and Jiya. He turned Han Wei in front of him. At the same time, the ancestor Xuanhuan glanced coldly towards the empty space in front of the left side. If someone is watching the battle at this moment, he may not understand why the ancestor Xuanhuan would look at the place where there is nothing, but Wei Suo is very clear why this is so, because that place is his head. Where insects lurking? Obviously, Xuanhuan's ancestor had already discovered his heartworm. And now the ancestors of Xuanhuan did not use their full strength at all. Wei Suo's face was completely gloomy, and even if the heart eater was killed, he would try to see if he could attract his attention, and then take the opportunity to stimulate the blood-eating knife with the most powerful attack on hand. Stop. But at this time, Xuanhuan Patriarch, who had a complete upper hand, waved his hand instead, reached out a little, and put away his yellow magic lotus-shaped magic weapon that had been eliminated by Wei Suo. And, seeing that the ancestor Xuanhuan apparently had no killing intentions, it seemed that he really wanted to stop his hand. Wei Suo slightly stunned, and immediately held down the blood-eating knife he wanted to stimulate. As long as you promise me to make a deal with me, I can not only cure you for setting up the agglomeration array and steal my Seafaring City aura, but also can give you a lot of benefits. Xuanhuan ancestor extended his hand a little, but it was Han Wei. It was sent to Wei Suo and Jiya, and then watching Wei Suo said indifferently. Make a deal? What deal? Wei Suo looked a little cloudy, now looking at the look of Xuanhuan Patriarch, he even felt that Fang Cai Xuanhuan Patriarch suddenly shot him, just to try his strength and try is he really not a monk of Ziwi Izong. Go in and talk. The ancestor of Xuanhuan glanced at Weizhuo, and he was not afraid of Weizhuo running away. After Weizhuo and Jia glanced at each other, they also gritted their teeth and followed the ancestor of Xuanhuan. The ancestor of Xuanhuan walked to the door of the quiet room where the Lingling array was arranged, and then stopped. After seeing the Lingling array for a while, an inexplicable and complex look flashed in his eyes, but he was very concerned. Without a word, he turned and looked at Weizhuo and Jia in the back. The monster you raised should be a heart-eater. It seems to be an elder-level heart-eater that is close to the 6th-level monster. From the look of your talents, in addition to the staff, should there be any other magic weapon at the bottom of the press box on hand? After glancing at Weizhuo and Jia, the ancestor of Xuanhuan looked at Weizhuo with a deep meaning. Now the seniors can make it clear. What trade do I have to do? Weizhuo didn't answer, but said not humble. Join my Haixianzong. Xuanhuan ancestor glanced at Weizhuo. If you really want to be my Haixianzong disciple, I can accept you as a disciple. If you don't want to join Zongmen, also can be my guest elder of Haixianzong. There is such a good thing. Weizhuo looked at Xuanhuan's ancestor, frowning. Senior, I am afraid that the transaction between you and me is not so simple. Of course the ancestor Xuanhuan looked at Weizhuo, but he seemed more satisfied with it. He smiled and said, after becoming a disciple of Haixianzong or Elder Keqing, you only have to attend once for me. See Hunting Conference. You use my Tianlan orange crystal to arrange the gathering spirit array to absorb my Sea Fairy City spirit, so that my Sea Fairy City spirit veins will be exhausted early, even if it is cancelled. The Sea Hunting Conference. Weizhuo's eyes flashed slightly. Can Senior explain in detail? This Sea Hunting Conference is a comparison conference between the three ancestors of Mingyuanzong, Ziweizong, and our Haixianzong. Every 20 years. Xuanhuan patriarch nodded, but a trace of dignity appeared on the face. The look, there is a place called the Blackwood Islands in the Sea of Silence, and there are many monsters and beasts. At the time of the Sea Hunting Conference, 3 elders and suzerain-level figures will block this place, and then 10 disciples were selected to enter the Blackwood Islands area. 3 days later, which one of the disciples hunted the most monsters and the highest level was the winner. The 3 disciples who participated in the Sea Hunting Conference, the true bone age must be under 40. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Path to Heaven. Author, Wu Ziyi. Chapter 279. Can the 3 disciples who participated in the Sea Hunting Conference hunt each other after entering? Weizhuo groaned for a while and asked Xuanhuan Patriarch. Ancestor Xuanhuan glanced at Weizhuo, then nodded and said, yes. Sure enough. Weizhuo's brow jumped. This Sea Hunting Conference is the same thing as the treasure-taking conference launched by Zongmen Zhenxianzong, the strongest of the eastern cities of the Tianqian continent, and Lingyun Jianmen, the strongest of the southern cities. The difference is that the treasure hunt conference is an open competition. After entering a region, the Sea Hunting Conference, which can completely kill each other, is obviously 100 times more dangerous than the treasure hunt conference. You don't have to think about it anymore, you have no choice. The ancestor Xuanhuan glanced at Weizhuo, who was pondering. Even if you have something powerful enough to threaten my magic weapon, it is useless at this moment. I can leave at all, so that the people of Haixianzong will besieging you, and then waiting for the opportunity to attack you. Even if you have the means, you can't deal with dozens of monks at the same time. Can you cope with my attack? Senior, you are really straightforward. Weizhuo smiled bitterly. Senior is probably more than Jin Dankai's heavy repair, right? In your capacity, you actually say that you want to attack the juniors. Are you afraid of jokes? Joke. For monks, it is true to survive, and everything else is fake. Xuanhuan Patriarch looked at Weizhuo and said very deeply. Since my predecessors are so direct, Then I can simply save some energy and ask more about the sea hunting conference. Wei Suo glanced at the ancestor of Xuanhuan and said, in addition to the real age, to participate in the sea hunting conference, just are there no other restrictions? For example, the magic weapon on your body, etc. The only other limitation is the limitation of the magical instruments. The ancestor Xuanhuan looked at Wei Suo, and his thoughts were indeed cautious. I really did not misunderstand you. The 3 students who participated in the sea hunting conference, it is only allowed to carry magic weapons or expendable magic weapons below the level, and magic weapons and expendable magic instruments above the level are not allowed to be brought in. Wei Suo pondered, only with such restrictions, can the magic weapon of the spirit order be unlimited in number? Can monsters such as heart eaters be brought in? The number of pieces is unlimited. Xuanhuan ancestor smiled, but the general sect does not press a lot of spirit-level magic weapons on a disciple's body. After all, you are also very clear. There are only a few pieces in time, and this kind of sea hunting conference, no one dares to guarantee that the disciples under the door can come out 100%, and there are many magic weapons on their bodies. If they are not done well, it is equivalent to giving away to the other party. After a pause, Xuanhuan Patriarch looked at Wei Suo and added, and all the 3 disciples who entered the sea hunting conference were scattered and sent from various directions using a teleportation symbol. No one knows that these disciples won where you will go in. Even if you are a disciple of good strength, if you just go in, you will meet 2 or 3 disciples of the other party who have gathered together. It is also very likely to fall. After all, you can participate in the sea hunting conference. The cultivation base will not be weak. As for the monsters such as the heartworm, there is no limit, because there is no slavery among the 3 sects, and even if there are monks who cultivate monsters, this monster cannot reach many levels, and poses no threat to elite disciples above the split period. You want me to participate in the sea hunting conference as a disciple of Xuanhuan, because the stakes of the sea hunting conference are heavy. The stakes are not heavy. 2 million lower grade spirit stones, and all the monsters hunted by the sea hunting conference. Xuanhuan ancestor said indifferently, the failed sect, the disciples who can live out, also all the monsters you hunted will be given to the winning section. 2 million lower grade spirit stones, Xuanhuan's ancestor said. It was an understatement, but Wei Suo was almost choked by his own saliva. 2 million lower grade spirit stones, is this a big bet? After glancing at the ancestor of Xuanhuan in a speechless manner, Wei Suo asked, when will the sea hunting conference be held? Xuanhuan ancestor said, just 7 months later. 7 months later, Wei Suo thought about it with his head tilted, and asked directly, since this bet is nothing for the senior, what would the senior want me to participate in the sea hunting conference? Anyway, seniors are not afraid of jokes. If they fear that the elite disciples in the door will fall out of control, they can send in disciples who are not influential. Do you think I haven't done this? Xuanhuan Patriarch looked at Wei Suo and shook his head. I did this the last 2 times. Anyway, 2 million inferior spirit stones is equivalent to making 1 less. It's just an elite disciple in the split period. If you lose 2 elite disciples in the split period, you're already making money, but this time, it's not going to work. Wei Suohan asked for a moment, and even more incomprehensibly asked, Senior, if you say that, I don't understand. I will say it simply. Sanzong engages in the sea hunting conference, it is nothing more than watching the strength of the 3 rising stars. Although Sanzong is kind on the face, everyone in the heart is staring at the piece of meat in the other person's mouth, otherwise it is impossible for such a sea hunting conference to come out. Xuanhuan ancestors sneered. We Xuanzong haven't seen any elite disciples with particularly good luck in the past 100 years, although they seem to receive spirit stones every day. A lot of it, but the strength is declining. If I were to sit in the town, I might have been swallowed by Mingyuanzong and Ziweizong. After he paused, The ancestor Xuanhuan continued to say, as it stands, as long as I am still there, even if this is the sea hunting conference, I will counsel twice and lose twice, but it doesn't matter. But if I'm gone, if our Haixian sect has not yet appeared as a disciple, and there are no new Jindan monks, or a monk who will definitely be able to repair the Jindan period, those two sects will certainly not give us the Haixian section patriarch, and I are faceless. Senior means. Wei Suo and Ji Ya couldn't help glancing at each other. You are very temperamental to me, and it happened to me to meet you at this time, which is also your fate. Now you are also agreeing to participate in the sea hunting conference, and I am also a disciple of my Haixian Zong. I don't have to talk about it, and I don't have anything to hide. The ancestor Xuanhuan glanced at Wei Suo, and said very directly, my life is at most 10 years left just now, your gray light, but also it took at least 1 month of my life. If you want me to participate in the sea hunting conference, should you be the genius disciple of the other two ancestors, Wei Suo looked at Xuanhuan patriarch and nodded, and said directly, you, if you want to benefit me, should I still be afraid that my strength is not enough to deal with the other two disciples? Ziwei Zong is not a big deal. Among its young disciples, there is at most only 3 monks in the Nian realm, but not even a monk in the Fornianian realm. However, Mingyuan Zone has a disciple of Ou Ranmen, but he is also a double spirit. Root monk, just different from your 2 systems of ice and fire, is the 2 roots of wind and thunder. This child has had a lot of chances. Not only has it reached the 5-fold cultivation period of the split period, it is amazing, and this child is arrogant. It's spicy and unusual. At the sea hunting conference 20 years ago, this child didn't overthink the practice of 2 levels, but most of the 10 disciples sent by Haixianzong died in this hand. If you can remove the sun this time, it would be considered a great trouble for my Haixian section. Ancestor Xuanhuan was very honest and did not take any turns. I said it will benefit you. Naturally there are also the ingredients to deal with this person but for me, I really want you to join the Haixianzong. Even if you don't want to join, I would rather try my best to show it, so that I have lived this age, the vision of people should be more accurate. With your temperament, you get a great benefit from me. If you owe my humanity, if Haixianzong has difficulties in the future, if you can help, you will definitely help. A sect's luck is unlucky, no matter how many spirit stones, it can't restore its decline. I even found a Tianling root disciple in the early years, but I can't fail to see it. When it broke through to the point of division, it broke out and fell away. It's a pity that you didn't come to my Sea Immortal City earlier to arrange this gathering array, otherwise I found out earlier that using this gathering array to practice may still break through to the next recultivation before Xiao Yuan runs out, and increase some life. Yuan, it is too late now. Weso heard something dumb. The straightness of this ancestor of Xian Yuan, there is nothing to hide, but it does fit his appetite. According to the predecessor's meaning, I intend to continue to let me practice with this Lingling array. After looking at the ancestor of Xuanhuan again, Wei Suo didn't ask around any bend. This is nature. Xuanhuan ancestor said indifferently, I think with your current cultivation practice, if you practice in this gathering, you should be able to break through before the sea hunting conference. The 4-layer cultivation of divided thoughts, and this spiritual line of our Haixian sect, will not last long. Now, even if we destroy this spiritual formation, it will have no meaning at all. After saying this, the ancestor Xuanhuan looked at Wei Suo, but he could not help but make a sound of admiration. At your age, you broke through the 4 levels of cultivation practice, and the speed of cultivation is indeed amazing. But what the predecessor said was that Ou Ranmeng of the Mingyuan zone had already achieved 5 levels of cultivation. Wei Suo did not look proud, and said, even if I am divided into 4 levels of cultivation, but he wasn't quite sure about him. Let's talk, what else do you want? The ancestor Xuanhuan pondered for a while. As long as I can give it, I will give it. As for the magic weapon below the Dao level, You don't need to consider it. I will naturally give you some. Combined. A Yangtze bird demon pill, I will use it to cure my companion after Wei Suo ordered Han Wei, he said one by one, I have a lot of handmade swords that can be refined. The materials are only missing a piece of magic crystal and a sword tactic. I also need a magical spell, and I want to cultivate this heartworm, and the corpse of the monster, the more the better. Path to Heaven. Author, Wu Ziwei. Chapter 280. Niaofahing and Jianju, there is no problem. After you break through to the 4-level cultivation of the split mind, I will naturally arrange it. The ancestor of Xuanhuan glanced at Wei Suo. Yangtze bird demon pill, I can't find it with certainty. It's okay if you can't find the magical skills of magical consciousness. This Yangtze bird demon pill is related to the life and death of my companion. Wei Suo groaned slightly and said, Senior, you can replace. I published a message saying that Haixianzong can exchange 2 pieces of ground fire fairy lotus for a Yangtze bird demon. As long as Haixianzong can help me find Yangtze bird demon, plus this matter, I will promise that you can really be your elder guest of Haixianzong. If Haixianzong really has difficulties in the future, I will definitely help. The 2 pieces of fire fairy lotus I have refined for a disciple, but that disciple will also be used to participate in the sea hunting conference. Ancestor Xuanhuan looked at Wei Ropewei. Wei Suo silently glanced at the ancestor of Xuanhuan. I still have 2 pieces on my body. Good fellow. Ancestor Xuanhuan was slightly surprised, but the gods returned to normal immediately. Since that is the case, then I will add 1 million inferior spirit stones to you and use 2 pieces of fire fairy. Lian added 1 million inferior spirit stones to acquire a Yangtze bird demon pill, which is finally worthy of you, elder guest of Qing dynasty. Do you have any special requirements for breeding monsters that eat heartworms? Thank you so much. Wei Suo sincerely paid a homage to the ancestor of Xuanhuan. As for the cultivation of heart-eater monster bodies, there are no special requirements. Of course, the higher the level, the better, the best. The more monsters in a department, the better. Ancestor Xuanhuan groaned a little, and asked, do you just eat the brains of monster beasts? Wei Suo nodded and said, not bad. I will help you get higher level monsters as much as possible. Xuanhuan patriarch glanced at Wei Suo without any nonsense. It's just that some monsters are just in our hands. When you're finished, still have to return the body of the monster. This is naturally no problem, Wei Suo answered simply. Since this is the case, you will continue to practice here. When you break through the 4-fold cultivation practice of the split period, you will come to me again, Xuanhuan ancestor said neatly. I'm afraid something will trouble seniors, Wei Suodeo said, otherwise, I might have been secretly calculated when I was practicing. Being secretly calculated? What do you mean? The old ancestor of Xuanhuan, who was about to turn and leave, waved his sleeves and frowned. When I was practicing, there was Aces the demon soul who slipped in and was overturned by me. I suspect that it was the Yin Corpse Elder Zuch's old strange place at the monk exchange meeting in the split period. Wei Suo looked at Xuanhuan ancestors and said, I know this recapture demon soul refining is very difficult. If I was killed by such a recapture demon soul, I will definitely not give up of. Seize the demon soul. With a loud bang, the ancestor of Xuanhuan exploded with yellow energy, and a violent expression appeared on his face. Only the talents of the Yin Corpse will seize this thing. The Yin Corpse is becoming more and more excessive. Dare to use this thing in my Haixian city. A moment later, the anger on Xuanhuan patriarch's face disappeared. Watching Wei Suo nodded, I will deal with this matter. You will not have to check it out every 10 times, you just don't have to come out. You can practice with peace of mind. As for what you want when you practice, tell the Haixian sect disciple outside that time. I will place several Haixian sect disciples outside your residence. After Suo nodded, he couldn't help but ask, Senior, I gather in the spirit array to absorb the aura. It is reasonable that I can't feel it outside. How can you find senior? The ancestor of Xuanhuan glanced at Wei Suo. I naturally can't feel it when I gather in the spirit array, but the aura in Haixian City is thin, but it can be felt by everyone. Every 10th, I have to check the passage of magic symbols. Pay attention to the changes in the repair behavior of all the inspecting and repairing monks. The speed of breakthroughs like yours is naturally too conspicuous. What kind of origin did you have before? I don't care anyway. After a pause, the ancestor of Xuanhuan glanced at Wei Suo. But the elder guest who is my Haixianzong always has a name. Later, it will be circulated among the disciples of Haixian sect. Wouldn't you really be called Li Lin? Wei Suo pondered for a while and said, the real name of the junior is Wei, with a single name. Tomorrow noon, I will send disciples to send the first batch of monsters and corpses. Every 2 times thereafter, I will send disciples to send the Nabeo sack with the monsters' corpses to the outside field before noon. When the time comes for you, put the used monster in the previous Nabeo and put it in front of the Lingtian outside. After the ancestor Xuanhuan explained this, he didn't say much and turned away from Weizhuo residence. After seeing Xuanhuan's ancestors disappearing completely into his sight, Wei Suo couldn't help but a bit of a wry smile appeared on his face. Although he has actually gained a lot of benefits, he is also very clear in his heart. This time, if he did not show his strength that could threaten the ancestor of Xuanhuan, he made Xuanhuan ancestors to deal with the other 2 disciples. Thought, otherwise Xuanhuan patriarch will surely kill himself without hesitation. After all, the energy consumed by him and Jia in this gathering a day is equivalent to at least 6 or 70,000 inferior spirit stones. After so many days, not counting the remaining losses of Haixianzong, it is equivalent to stealing tens of millions of inferior spirit stones from Haixianzong. In fact, this time it was indeed that the effect of this gathering was too strong, and the speed of cultivation was too fast, so that he was indeed too greedy, and it was a bit careless. Otherwise, if you only break through 1 or 2 levels of cultivation, or stop practicing for a while, let the aura change not be so obvious, and if you close it, you won't have the disaster. This sea hunting conference is not easy to get through. To let Wei Suo now deal with opponents with 5 levels of strength, especially the genius disciples who have rarely seen Zongmen for 100 years, there must be a lot of powerful magic weapons on their bodies. To deal with such opponents, Wei Suo can now say I'm not sure. What's more, Wei Cai, the founder, just heard Xuanhuan's ancestors said, and entered the Blackwood Islands of the Sea Hunting Conference, which inspired a teleportation symbol in different directions. In the unlikely event that it happened to be sent to the opponent's 2 full-text 2 powerful monks, then the strength is a little higher than the 2 powerful monks, and it is also necessary to fight with 2 fists. It's over. In case Wei Suo fell in the Sea Hunting Conference, Wei Suo did not think that Xuanhuan Patriarch would have any good temper, help him deal with what happened afterwards, and help him cure Han Weiwei. It is still 7 months before the Sea Hunting Conference. During these 7 months, it is more urgent to improve their strength. Insufficient greed is really the greatest sin of a monk. After introspecting his mistakes this time, Wei Suo Ki and Jia returned to the Lingling formation and began to practice harder. At noon on the 2nd day, a disciple of Haixian sect wearing a black shirt passed through the red mask wrapped in Wei Suo's residence silently, and Bai Gongdi laid down an ordinary black sapphire in front of the Lingtian after the bag. The disciple of Haixian sect did not make any sound, and he retreated directly. The figure of the Haixianzong disciple just wore a red mask, the blue light flashed, and Wei Suo, wearing an ordinary green cloth robe, swept through the door of his residence, and quickly passed through the Lingtian. The Nabeo capsule put down by the famous Haixianzong disciple was taken into the hands. Then he immediately flew back to his residence, the one closest to the door, in the quiet room used to breed heartworms. It was discovered that the heartworm had advanced once, and after the advanced ability of anti-hidden, Wei Suo was looking forward to the next advance of this heartworm. Now his heart-eater elder should already be above the 5th level intermediate level, very close to the strength of the 5th level high-level monster. According to common sense, after the advancement again, the strength will definitely jump again, at least it should reach the level of low-level 6 monsters. Ordinary 6th level low-level monsters are already equivalent to a monk who divides the mind, and not to mention the heartworm, but it also has the unique ability to shock and stealth. After plunging into this quiet room dedicated to cultivating heartworms, Wei Suo immediately took out all the monsters in this treasure. The number of monsters in Nebeo is not much, there are less than 40 heads. It seems that the ancestors of Xuanhuan also have some understanding of the meal amount of this heartworm. Knowing so many monsters, it has been almost 2 days to deal with the heartworm. The number is not much, but at a glance at the rank of these monsters, Wei Suo suddenly froze. Among these monsters, the most low-level monster has reached the 4th level. Most of the rest, the level is above the amazing 5th level intermediate level, and there is even a colorful giant chapter with a level up to the 6th level intermediate level. The huge body almost fills most of the quiet room. And I don't know if the ancestor of Xuanhuan heard Wei Suo said that it is better to be a monster of the same line, or because the Sea Fairy City is located on the edge of the Sea of Silence, and there are water monsters everywhere. These monsters are all water monsters. I saw Wei Suo's ecstatic order to let the heartworm soak in the demon's liquid, while letting his stomach open to the brains of these high-level water monsters. He groaned for a while, and then took out a piece of green. Many jade symbols have been written on it. After 2 days, Wei Suo put these monsters that had been emptied of their brains into the Nebeo, and put it outside the linked yen. When charging a new Nebeo that was full of monsters, he also put this piece of green monsters. Yafu was placed on top of the Nebeo that he took out. Path to Heaven. Author, Wu Zy. Chapter 281. Gray bone moth, cabernet poison spider, small leaf insect. Soon, this piece of blue jade was handed to the ancestor of Xuanhuan. So many kinds and numbers of poisonous insects, are you still a monk who knows how to refine the magical technique of immortal goo? Wei Suo, the surprises you gave me are more and more after reading all the content on this blue jade rune. Xuanhuan Patriarch's eyes flashed differently, and after saying this to himself, Xuanhuan Patriarch took it easy, and a yellow light flew from his fingertips. He flew out of the hall where he was. Only in a few breaths, a disciple of the ideological realm, who was dressed in a red vestment, appeared at the entrance of this hall. Go. Prepare everything above and send it to Elder Wei. The ancestor Xuanhuan did not have any nonsense. While saying this with great majesty, he shot the blue jade symbol on his hand in front of the disciple of Haixian section. The disciples of Haixianzong turned around and swept out without saying anything after paying a ritual. 2 nights later, a large box of various skins and various materials was secretly sent to Wei Suo's residence by Haixianzong. All of these things were moved by Wei Suo into a quiet room beside the heartworm. There was also a cyan jade basin in the quiet room, and there was a smelly bug in the faint yellow liquid. After examining the contents of the various skin sacks and various boxes one by one with God's consciousness, Wei Suo stretched out his hand to unlock a skin sack, and grabbed a lot of lotus roots, which was covered with mucus. Disgusting white maggot. Later, he stroked a blood bead on his left hand. As a trick was completed in his hand, this blood bead condensed into a strange blood-red charm in the air and hit the body of the white maggot. Immediately afterwards, I saw him picking up the egg soaked in the faint yellow liquid, and then made a stroke, and made a slit in the head of the wriggling white maggot, and hit the egg. Strangely enough, many white filaments quickly grew on this egg, as if many roots had grown, parasitic on this white maggot. After completing all this, Wei Suo was relieved, and immediately changed a pot of red medicine, soaked this disgusting white maggot in it, and after observing for about an incense stick, Wei Suo turned and left. Quiet room. For the next 3 days, neither Wei Suo nor Ji Ya appeared in this quiet room. On the 4th day, The egg completely disappeared on the head of the white maggot and merged with the disgusting white maggot. 2 days later, the appearance of the white maggots turned gray and black, and just in the evening of the day, Wei Suo appeared in this quiet room again, turning this one into gray. The black maggots were put into a big blue wooden box. Inside the large cyan wooden box is a small flower with black stamens but purple petals. Originally, the gray-black maggots were still half dead, but after being put into this box, they suddenly got their spirits and started to eat up the little flowers in this box. After 7 or 8 days, when Wei Suo walked into the quiet room again, the small flowers in the big blue wooden box had been swallowed up, and the gray-black maggot had spit out many black filaments, forming a black cocoon. After a full month, the black cocoon cracked, and a crumpled gray-black rag-like thing was drilled out of it. Wait until this crumpled gray-black rag-like thing slowly unfolded. After coming, it was a gray-black giant butterfly that was 1 foot long. After the gray-black giant butterfly hatched, Wei Suo didn't appear again, but Ji Ya stepped into the quiet room every few days, except for giving the gray-black giant butterfly some strange flowers from time to time. In addition to the weeds and the elixirs, a variety of worms were also released to fight this gray-black giant butterfly. More than 130 days passed quickly. The aura in the sea fairy city becomes thinner day by day. In the first day, the inner city of Haixian City, which can absorb the aura of a lower-grade spirit stone, can slowly absorb only 1/3 of the aura of the lower-grade spirit stone. Haixian City's original fee for 1 inferior spirit stone staying in the inner city for 1 day has now become a 3-day fee for 1 inferior spirit stone. On this day, all the monks in Haixian City were shocked to see the red fairy lotus standing at the very top of Haixian City. The red lotus in their hands suddenly shattered and fell all at once. The red failian in the hands of the sea fairy statue suddenly shattered, and the spirit in Shanghai Fairy City became thinner and thinner, and it would be exhausted in less than half a year. All the disciples in the sea fairy city were not Haixianzong disciples. The thought of whether Haixianzong has really gotten close to him has arisen in my heart. And on the day when the red failian in the hands of the sea fairy all shattered, Wei Suo, who closed his eyes and practiced in the gathering of spirits, suddenly felt something like it and opened it all at once. Binocular, and quickly flew into the quiet room dedicated to the breeding of heartworms. I saw a faint layer of oil on the ground in front of the jade basin where Pei Yei was placed. When Wei Suo stretched out his hand and grabbed it, this layer of light oil was caught, and it was a skin that the heartworm took off. After more than 130 days, after absorbing the water monsters of level 4 and level 5 and cultivating the two-pronged bubbling in PEO liquid, Wei Suo's heart-biting insect finally broke through. Before the fourfold cultivation of the ideal state, we ushered in another advancement. After collecting this skin, which is no less than that of the elders who ate the heartworms in the past, Wei Suo took a piece of silver refining silver from the Nebeo that he carried with him to test the power of the magic weapon. Under a slight blink of eyes, at this moment still in front of the heart-eater that was consuming the brain of a demon, suddenly more than 10 pieces of white crescent-shaped water blades with a length of 1 foot appeared, and then just blinked, and suddenly flew around. In the air, I hit this piece of silver from all directions. Kappa. With a burst of explosive noise, Qianlianyan suddenly showed more than 10 deep marks. Seeing such a scene, Wei Suo suddenly filled his eyes with irresistible ecstasy. The power of the water blade stimulated by his heart-eater is no less than the power of a mid-level magic weapon, and the water blade stimulated by the heart-eater is still flying in a broken line in the air. This spell strength is slightly more than that of a real 6th-level low-level monster. Now that this heart-eater has evolved again, the advanced method is the aquatic spell. It seems that Wei Suo's previous guess is probably good. If the brain of the monster of a certain line has been swallowed, this heart-eater has advanced again. If it does, it will advance the ability of this monster. With such a monster on his body, it is equivalent to bringing a monk with a parting concept to him. Even when he participated in the sea hunting conference, he had bad luck. When he entered, he met two other parts. The above monks, Wei Suo will not be without a fight. Because with the depletion of the aura of Haixian city, the concentration of auras in the gathering of spirits has also faded a lot. Apart from being happy, Wei Suo did not dare to waste time at all. He has tested this advanced bitter insect again. After that, he immediately returned to the Lingling formation and closed his eyes to practice. On the coastline of 12,000 miles from Haixian city, there stands a large blue city. The size of this Xian city is about 1.5 times larger than that of Haixian city. If Weizhuo sees the city, he will be extremely surprised. Because the city is actually built on a bronze stump. This stump of bronze color is as high as several hundred feet, 500 or 600 square meters. How amazing will this giant tree be? This giant tree is the famous Tianyuan Zhenmu in Yunling mainland. It is said that this tree was cultivated by Li Tianyuan, a monk who had repaired the fivefold of Shenxian realm, the first scattered repair of Yunling continent 8,000 years ago. In the end, Li Tianyuan cut off the wood and refined it into a magic weapon, which was used to resist the thunderstorm sky trigger caused when the god profound realm broke into the real fairyland. But in the end, Li Tianyuan failed to cross the robbery, and thunder and fire died. Later, Ming Yanzong's ancestor Ming Yanzhen took the opportunity to occupy the stump of this giant tree, and established the Mingyuan city on the stump of Tianyuan Zhenmu. Although this Tianyuan Zhenmu has lost its aura and has no other magic, it will grow an elixir called Fenjai Yuan Zi from time to time. It is not bad for people who practice wind system skills and spells. Fewer benefits. The Mingyuan zone mainly focused on the wind system skills and techniques. The center of Mingyuan city is also the center of the tree stump of Tianyuan Zhenmu, covering a cyan mask of dozens of circles. Among the cyan masks is the mountain gate of Mingyuan zone. I saw a magnificent palace in it, and the ground between all these temples was actually covered with bluish-red Fenjai Yuanzi. In a 3-story pavilion, a scented purple plate of fragrant smoke fluttered like clouds in the air. Ran Meng, according to our news, this time there are a pair of monks in the Zaiwei sect, all of whom have already achieved the threefold practice of splitting the mind, and the two have practiced some kind of mind-spirit connection method. Gather together, you have to be careful. Sitting cross-legged in the middle of the pavilion, it is the 4 old men who seem to be old-fashioned, but their eyes are extremely fierce old men in Chinese clothes. Sitting under the heads of the 4 old men was a monk wearing a goose yellow vest. The monk was under the age of 40, with a face like white jade, handsome and unusual, and an unusually light and elegant atmosphere on his body. In addition, the monk's next head, also sitting more than a dozen young monks, all well proportioned and tall, exuding a proud air above him. Is the 2 monks who are divided into 3 levels of cultivation. On the rise, a sneer of disdain appeared. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Path to Heaven. Author, Wu Zy. Chapter 282. The old man in the golden Chinese costume glanced at the famed monk in the goose yellow vestment, and then said, "The ancestor Xuanhuan recruited an elder guest from Haixian city to join Haixian Zong, which should also be used to participate in the sea hunting. General Assembly." Elder Keking, the monk in yellow goose suit whispered, said indifferently, "What kind of cultivation is it?" "It seems to be a separate cultivation practice." The old man in the golden Chinese costume raised his eyelids and said, "I think the ancestor of Xuanhuan should still be reluctant to die of his hard-working disciples, and want to find some outsiders to fool it." Fooling the past, the monk in yellow goose garb smiled. "Wait another 10 years, when I form Jindan, his life Yuan should be left. Jindan is exhausted. Then I will directly challenge Shanghai Xianzong He. See if he can hide even then. This time the opponent is mainly Ziwei Zong, but Ziwei Zong also wants to hit us hard at the sea hunting conference." The old man in the golden Chinese costume nodded his tone, glanced deeply at all the Minjai Yuanzong disciples present. There is still almost 3 months, you all have to practice hard and prepare to go. The sect master has orders. The disciples who participated in the sea hunting conference all rewarded Xuanhuan and killed one other disciple. A super-level magical item of the spirit order, killing more than 3 disciples of the opponent, rewards a heaven-level spell. Xuanhuan, which can promote 10 years of Shaoyuan. Heavenly spell. As soon as the old man in the golden Chinese costume came out, all the disciples of Ming Yuanzong except the monk in the goose yellow vestment were completely excited. After another noon of more than 20 days, and 2 months before the sea hunting conference of the Ming Yuanzong, Ziweizong, and Haixianzong, the red mask outside Wei Suo's residence flashed. A young man in a green shirt came out of it. Elder Wei. He was about to send a Nabeo sack full of corpses of monsters into the black shirt Haixianzong disciple of Wei Suo's residence. When he saw the young man in the blue shirt, he stayed for a while. Although he knew that it was an Elder Wei who lived here, and this disciple of the Haixian sect had sent a treasure bag for several months, he was also the first to see this Elder Wei himself. It's so young. While unconsciously paying homage to the Elder Wei who came out, the disciple who looked like he was about 30 years old suddenly had a terrified look in his eyes. This disciple of Haixianzong felt that this Elder Wei who suddenly appeared out of nowhere was at least a monk with 2 different levels and 3 or more levels, but the Elder Wei in front of him, the true bone age, is definitely only 27 to 8 years old. At the age of 27 or 8 years, he has already achieved 2 levels of separation, even more than 3 levels of practice. I am afraid that the speed of entry into the territory may not be comparable to that of the Yunling continent. At least this disciple of Haixian sect only knew that the famous genius disciple of Ming Yuanzong Ou Ranmen had such a speed of entry. Even the genius disciple of Ming Yuanzong, Ou Ranmen, was said to be coincidental when he was a child. He took a fairy scale dragon scale grass and directly cultivated a sea of gods, and opened his mind at the same time. Ordinary children begin to practice when they are 2 or 3 years old, so it is only at the age of about 20 that they break through to the amazing practice of dividing the mind. Are you here to send the treasure to the disciples of Haixianzong? It was Wei Suo who had recovered his original appearance from the red mask, and was a little stunned at the name because of his age and cultivation. The disciple of Haixianzong, Wei Suo's vanity was suddenly satisfied, and he was very proud of himself, but he was quiet, and he looked like a person of high style. After saying this, he would directly handed the treasure chest containing the used monsters to this disciple of Haixian sect. This disciple of Haixian sect only came back to God at this time. He took the Nabeo sack that Wei Suo handed over, and handed the Nabeo sack with the body of the monster on his body to Wei Suo. Asked, "Is there anything wrong with Elder Wei coming out this time?" "I came out this time to see my ancestor." Between the speeches, another disciple of the Haixian sect wearing a silver shirt greeted him. This Haixianzong disciple is also about 30 years old, but his cultivation practice is 1 step higher than that of the black shirt Haixianzong disciple, which is Zhou Tianjing's 5-fold cultivation practice. Elder Wei, it was the same horrified eyes that after paying a tribute to Wei Suo, the disciple of the black shirt Haixian sect immediately said to this disciple of silver shirt, "Elder Wei wants to see the ancestor, please ask Brother Lin to take him before go." Listening to the tone of the disciples in the black shirt Haixianzong, it seems that he is not yet qualified to take Wei Suo to see the ancestor of Xuanhuan. "Elder Wei, please come with me." The disciples of Yingxian Haixianzong, who arrived later, immediately led the way without a word. After a while, Wei Suo stood on the white ladder of Haixianzong again. Just like last time, it was a huge lotus platform, which directly connected Wei Suo to the huge palace on the top of the mountain. The ancestor of Xuanhuan, dressed in earthy robes, still stood in the hall. And, when we saw Wei Suo walking down from the lotus platform, the Xuanhuan ancestor who stood with his hand on his back immediately showed a look of surprise. "Wei Suo, you haven't actually broken through the 4 levels of thinking. Cultivate as Wei Suo smiled happily without saying anything, but his breath suddenly became stronger. An unexpected look appeared in the eyes of Xuanhuan Patriarch. The other party will certainly look down upon you more. What are the things I want, how are they prepared? Wei Suo asked. Nonsense. The magic of shocking consciousness is really too scarce. I haven't found it yet, but I know that your consciousness is very powerful, and it's really wasteful not to use it, so I temporarily found a psychedelic illusion for you. The technique, called Tianxian Shenchu, can transform three phantoms that are exactly the same as the body, making it difficult for the other party to distinguish. Yangtze Bird Demon Pill, although I haven't got it yet, I have got a definite message that I know a monk has this thing in hand. After the sea hunting conference, I will take you personally to ask for it. As for Niao Fahing, I have prepared it for you. After saying these two words, Xuanhuan Patriarch reached out a little and hit an ordinary black Nabeo directly into Wei Suo's hands. After Wei Suo swept towards Nabeo, he groaned slightly. Is the monk who was afraid of his predecessor the one who owns that Yangtze Bird Demon Pill? Good, the ancestor Xuanhuan said without any disguise. The man was named Hongyun Zhenren. He was a Jindan period free repairer. This person cultivated a Yangtze bird. However, this person was a Jindan period. I will come forward and give enough benefits, he must give me some face. Wei Suo nodded and looked at the ancestor Xianyu and said, what about the flying sword tactic? Fijian Jianju, I have some in the Haixianzong Buddhist scripture hall. The ancestor Xianyu glanced at Wei Suo. Waiting for me will take you into the Tibetan scripture hall. You can choose the appropriate techniques and sword tactics yourself. It is. Let me enter the Haixianzong Buddhist scripture hall to choose by myself. Wei Suo's brow suddenly jumped. You are my elder guest of the Haixianzong sect, naturally qualified to enter the Haixianzong Zangjing Hall. Xianyuan ancestor said indifferently, it's just that my Haixianzong Zangjing Hall was laid out by the patriarch, and can only be entered once every 5 years. After entering once, you can only choose one skill and one skill. You can choose the most suitable skill and spell according to your current situation. After a pause, Xianyuan Patriarch glanced at Wei Suo again and said, it's just that the flying sword is flexible, but it also needs the stronger the true element's power, the more it can control Ruyi, the stronger it is. The most practiced is only the prefecture level middle level exercises. With the remaining 2 months, the total amount of aura remaining in Haixian City is also impossible for you to break through to the 5 levels of the mindfulness before the sea hunting conference. For the sake of cultivation. With your 4 levels of realism, the true power of the mid-level exercises at the ground level, it is no problem to control the flying sword against the ordinary monks, but I met 2 other top disciples, especially now Ran Meng. But it's not of much use, then Ou Ran Meng is practicing prefecture level high-level exercises. In my opinion, you'd better find the most suitable technique first. Don't think about it in the long run. Through this crisis in front of us. Thank you, Senior, for reminding me that the younger generation has their own minds about this matter. Wei Suo was also very profound and nodded. Come with me. In the eyes of Xuanhuan's ancestor, there was another flash of light, and no more to say, he turned around and led the way in front. I don't know why. The more he looked at Wei Suo, the more he felt that he had read the wrong person this time. A moment later, Xianyuan Patriarch and Wei Suo stood in front of a white jade door. Fairy. I saw this white jade gate with a height of 4 people, and there was a blood-red Xian at the top. This word gives people an indescribable apparent coercion, as if there were blood sea corpses in it. Below the word, there is a statue of a light and elegant woman. I saw this woman looking up, looking at the word Xian, but she looked helpless. It is just this simple word and an expression that has already expressed the difficulty of cultivating and seeking immortality. This is also the statue of Haizong, the ancestor of the mountain ancestor of this ancestor. The 5-fold cultivation of the golden ancestor of this ancestor, the sea ancestor of the ancestor, did not break through to the God-profound realm in the end. A bitter smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. After saying this to Wei Suo, Xuanhuan Patriarch reached out and waved a yellow light on the door. With a creep, the white jade door slowly opened back. Path to Heaven. Author, Wu Ziyi. Chapter 283. Every technique and technique is prohibited. There are the names of the technique and some simple introductions. You have to think about it, and then use your consciousness to get the technique or cultivation method of the technique. The specific situation will be clear when you look inside. However, the selection of exercises and spells cannot exceed 2 hours at most, and more than 2 hours will be sent out by the ban inside. After confessing this sentence again, Xuanhuan Patriarch made a welcoming gesture to Wei Suo. Wei Suo didn't say much. After nodding, he stepped into the Tibetan pavilion of Haixianzong. He knew that basically, in order to ensure the inheritance of each sect, there would be such a Tibetan scripture pavilion, but the restrictions of each sect were different. For Xuanhuan Patriarch's sincere attitude of using people without doubt, Wei Suo is also embarrassed to play ghosts, and can only help Haixianzong to participate in the sea hunting conference. After entering the Tibetan Buddhist monastery, Wei Suo saw a hall in front of him, in which hundreds of white aurolite were suspended, and outside each head-sized aurolite ball, there was also a white aura yufu. Directly facing the corner of Wei Suo, there is a ladder going up. Xian Qi cited. 3. Practicing Qi. Zi Ting True Solution. Fire Rain. Ice Archery. Wei Suo glanced in front of each white light ball, and found that what was recorded in this layer were basically some techniques below the Xian level and some low-level spells suitable for low-level disciples. After walking up the stairs and looking at the general situation of the Tibetan scripture pavilion, Wei Suo discovered that the Tibetan scripture pavilion was originally divided into 3 levels. Some high-level exercises and spells are all sealed in the second floor of the hall, and the third floor is an attic, which records all of them are not low-level exercises and spells, but they are all it is an incomplete fragment. Next, Wei Suo entered the hall on the second floor, and the jade symbols introduced one by one quickly looked up. Half an hour later, Wei Suo looked at all the jade symbols in this hall, and then entered the attic of the third floor, and continued to look at the jade symbols introduced one by one quickly. About half an hour later, Wei Suo read all the jade symbols in the third floor attic. Then on Wei Suo's face, a very hesitant appeared. After at least hesitating for a long time, I saw that Wei Suo finally made up his mind, but the consciousness went directly into a white light ball in the third floor attic. After that, his eyes flashed slightly, obviously the content sealed in the white sphere of spiritual light in mind and enlightenment. After a total of 1.5 hours, footsteps sounded and Wei Suo walked out of Haixianzong's Tibetan scripture pavilion. What technique did you choose? As soon as Wei Suo walked out, the ancestral ancestor Xuanhuan immediately greeted him. He was also curious about what kind of technique Wei Suo would choose. The younger generation chose Jinyun Jianju, Wei Suo replied. What? This answer is completely beyond the expectations of Xuanhuan Patriarch. After an unbelievable glance at Wei Suo, Xuanhuan ancestor said, this is a broken piece, do you have the first half of the sword tactic? Wei Suo nodded, the upper part of Jinyun's sword tactics is not there, but there are other sword tactics on hand for the juniors, which seems to be just right. You are getting more and more obscured by me, the ancestor of Xuanhuan seemed to want to ask again, but after frowning slightly, he refrained, and after a little deep groan, he said, the other spells you know, if you use your cultivation as the power, you should also be able to surpass the yin elemental spells you used when you were against me. My Xuanhuan Lingguang is of some use to you. After saying this, the ancestor of Xuanhuan took out a piece of yellow jade, which was helplessly thrown to Wei Suo. Thank you, senior. You can call me a predecessor now, and at the time of the sea hunting conference, you will call me an ancestor like other disciples of the Haixian section. The ancestor Xuanhuan watched Wei Suo put Yufu into his pocket. When you come down, you will continue to retreat. I will naturally send someone to inform you the day before the start of the sea hunting conference. Good, Wei Suo nodded without any nonsense, and then went out of Haixianzong, and went straight into his residence. Heaven-level low-level defensive technique. It seems that the ancestor Xuanhuan was really uneasy about me choosing this Jinyun sword tactic. After entering the residence, Wei Suo immediately removed the yellow jade amulet given to him by the ancestor Xuanhuan, and realized. Soon, with his murmur, a very proud appeared on his face. To be honest, Haixianzong sect is still far above Tianyumen and Danjiao resorts. There are really a lot of powerful techniques in the Tibetan scripture pavilion. There are as many as 5 kinds of techniques that reach the mid-level of heaven. There are also 4 types of complete sword tactics. In contrast, Wei Suoxuan's Jinyun Jianju's grade is really a bit low. Because the power of this Jinyun sword tactic against the enemy is only able to use the power of the true Yuan, so that the refined flying sword is heavy many times when it is beheaded. This kind of swordsmanship, if Zhenyuanqiu is very amazing, it is naturally very powerful to use. If it is performed by the 3- and 4-fold monks of the Jindan period, and there is a flying sword with an amazing weight on hand, then when the beheaded, the flying sword may be like a mountain hill. However, Wei Suo is now only divided into 4 levels of cultivation, and his true power exerts this tactic. No matter how powerful it is nowhere near. What's more, this Jinyun sword tactic is just a fragment, and there are many ways to change the speed and the direction of flight. In the eyes of Xuanhuan's ancestors, this sword tactic is naturally the most important thing for the sea hunting conference. Not very useful. For a sect, the techniques and exercises themselves are the foundation of the section. Especially Wei Suo is not a true disciple of Xuanhuan ancestors. From the beginning, Xuanhuan ancestors would rather give him 1 or 2 more magic weapons of the spirit order, rather than spreading many of his powerful techniques. Obviously, we were a little speechless about Wei Suo's choice, and felt that it was of little use before we subsidized this defensive technique. This defensive technique called Xuanhuan Lingguang is a very useful aura mask defense technique. That is, it was used when the ancestor Ri Xuanhuan against Wei Suo. After the application, the surface of the yellow light mask formed was still the technique with a pattern of evergreen. The reason why the ancestor of Xuanhuan passed this skill to Wei Suo was obviously because of the Battle of Ri, and he saw that Wei Suo did not have any powerful mask defense skills. But this Jinyun sword tactic, for Wei Suo, the meaning is completely different. Because this sword tactic is incomplete, only some basic sword control and slave sword methods, with Wei Suo's half of the thunder sword tactic on hand, pieced together, it can be used. The most important reason why Wei Suo decided to choose this fragment, instead of other complete sword tactics, is that according to Hai's comment to this Jinyun sword tactic, every time the Jinyun sword tactic was cast, the Emperor Fijian's words, everyone will absorb a hint of golden spirit from the flying sword. It is very likely that the golden spirit root will be cultivated in the body over time. In other words, this sword tactic is actually a peculiar sword tactic that is very likely to produce Jin Lingan. Wei Suo is now a monk of the 2 spirit roots of ice and fire. If he can repair that gold root again, that is the monk of the 3 spirit roots. The normal cultivation speed is faster, and the talent is even more powerful. Secondly, among the flying sword materials refined by Wei Suo, in addition to materials such as Xintian Jing gold and Taijing gold, which can certainly create a good flying sword on the carcass, he has just the right hand. There is also a piece of gold that was bought by the old man in green robe before the big purchase. This metamagnetic gold is smelted in the magical carcass, and when excited, it can make the magical carcass 100 times heavier. Coupled with the unique aggravating effect of Jinyun Jianju itself, the power of flying sword is definitely extraordinary. In addition to these, it is also very important that during the previous retreat, Jia helped Wei Suo from time to time to make up Tian Tian, and Wei Suo agreed to the conditions for Xuanhuan ancestors to participate in the sea hunting conference. Every time Jia spends a lot of time refining bullet in Tiandan. Anyway, the materials for refining Buishandan, Wei Suo were mixed in batches among other materials, and Haixianzong was sent in. Over the past few months, Jia has helped Wei Suo refining bullet in Tiandan, who is enough to raise his Zixian true tactics to the lower level of heaven. The same four-level cultivation of the same mindfulness is the lower-level true elemental power of the heaven level is more than several times stronger than the true elemental power of the prefecture-level intermediate level. The reason for the sea hunting conference is not limited to flying swords, because the power of flying swords is limited to the practice of true Yuan. Generally, monks who practice Tianji exercises, when they divide the 5 levels of cultivation, control the flying sword. The power may be more powerful than the Daijia inferior magic weapon, and it is more flexible than the general magic weapon. When it comes to the triple and quadruple of the Nian realm, it is rare to see it for hundreds of years in the Tianxian continent and the Yunling continent. In the sea hunting conference, there have never been any monks who have practiced the celestial level exercises and can achieve the 4 levels of ambition. Now it is the next time. As long as the flying sword can be successfully refined, Wei Suo can be sure that the power of the flying sword will at least exceed the spirit level high-level magic weapon by relying on this golden Yunjian tactics to make the flying sword. And if other spells and sword tactics are required today, Xuanhuan Patriarch will certainly not give out this Xuanhuan aura spell, and got a sword tactic, and also earned a heaven level aura defense. It is no wonder that Wei Suo will be proud.